The massive council chamber floated in the darkness of space, orbiting the ancient world of Velthor. Inside, 12 species gathered around a circular platform that glowed with soft blue light. They had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years, maintaining peace through law and overwhelming military force. Today, they faced a problem that threatened everything they had built. Supreme Chancellor Thor rose from his seat. His crystalline body reflected the light in 1,000 directions, making him appear as if he was made of living diamonds. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into every language present. The human question must be resolved. We have delayed long enough. The representatives shifted in their seats. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. The humans had appeared in the galaxy only 200 years ago. Emerging from their small yellow star, with primitive fusion drives and wild ambition. At first, the council had watched with amusement as these newcomers stumbled through their first contact protocols. But the amusement had faded quickly. Humans expanded faster than any species in recorded history. They claimed systems without asking permission. They built colonies on worlds the council had designated as protected. They ignored treaties they had never signed and laughed at warnings from species who had mastered space travel before humanity had invented the wheel. Most troubling of all, they bred like insects and spread like disease. In 2 centuries, humanity had established over 400 colony worlds. They must be stopped, declared Ambassador Thelcor, a reptilian being whose scales shimmered green and gold. They take what they want without regard for galactic law. They are savages pretending to be civilized. They are dangerous, added Representative Plix, a floating jellyfish-like creature suspended in a tank of glowing fluid. Their military grows stronger every year. They reverse engineer our technology and improve upon it. Give them another century, and they will be unstoppable. Viacthor raised one crystalline hand. Then we are agreed. The Galactic Council hereby declares humanity to be in violation of 47 statutes of interstellar law. We authorize military action to contain this threat. The human species will surrender all colonies beyond their home system within 72 hours or face total war. The vote was swift. 10 species voted in favor. 2 abstained. None voted against. The declaration was official. Within minutes, the message was being broadcast across every inhabited system in the galaxy. The Council's vast military fleet, over 10,000 warships strong, began moving toward human space like a tide of steel and fire. On the human colony world of New Sol, Admiral Doyen stood in the Central Command Center watching the transmission. He was a tall man with gray streaking through his black hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Around him, junior officers stared at the screens in shock. Some looked afraid. Others looked angry. Doyen felt neither emotion. He felt only a cold certainty settling into his bones. Commander Hygen stood beside him, her face calm despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. She had served under Doyen for 15 years and knew him better than anyone. They actually did it, she said quietly. They declared war on all of humanity, as Doyen replied. They did. We're outnumbered 50-1. Maybe more. Their ships are bigger, faster, better armed. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours in some areas. St. John spoke without emotion, simply stating facts. Military analysts say we have less than 5% chance of survival if this goes to full-scale war. Doyen smiled, and there was something dark in that smile. The analysts are wrong. They're calculating this like a normal war. But this won't be a normal war, sir. The Council has ruled this galaxy for thousands of years. They've fought wars, yes, but always against species that eventually surrendered. They understand occupation and submission. They understand treaties and reparations. Doyen turned to look at Hygen directly. They don't understand humans. They don't understand that we spent 10,000 years fighting each other over rocks and patches of dirt. They don't understand that we've burned our own cities to ashes rather than let enemies take them. They think we'll be reasonable, and we won't be. We can't afford to be. Doyen walked to the main console and opened a communication channel. Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Military encryption, highest priority. The connection established within seconds. On the screen appeared Admiral Park, the supreme commander of all human military forces. She was older than Doyan, her face lined with age and responsibility. Behind her, the war room on Earth buzzed with activity. Doyan, you've seen the declaration? Yes, ma'am. They want our surrender in 72 hours. What do you recommend? Doyan didn't hesitate. We tell them no. We fight. We make them regret ever learning our name. Admiral Park was quiet for a moment. You understand what you're saying? We'll be at war with the entire Galactic Council. Millions will die. Maybe billions. We could lose everything. Yes, ma'am. But if we surrender, we lose everything anyway. They'll take our colonies. They'll restrict our growth. They'll treat us like children who need to be controlled and punished. In 50 years, 100 years, they'll decide we're still too dangerous and come back to finish what they started. Better to fight now, while we still have the strength and the will. Other voices joined the discussion as more commanders connected to the call. General Minho from Mars Colony, Captain Juan from the Frontier Defense Fleet, Admiral Cho from Europa Station. One by one, humanity's military leadership weighed in. The debate was surprisingly short. They had all reached the same conclusion Dawn had. Surrender was not acceptable. Death was preferable to subjugation. Admiral Park made the final decision. Very well. All forces are hereby placed on war footing. Begin implementation of Contingency Plan Omega-7. We have 72 hours to prepare. Make them count. The transmission ended. Doyen turned to address the command center. Every officer was watching him, waiting for orders. You all heard the declaration, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. The Galactic Council has decided we're too dangerous to exist as a free species. They want us to bow down and accept their rule. They think we'll be afraid. He paused, letting the silence stretch. But we're humans. We've faced extinction before and survived. We've fought impossible wars and won. We've stared into the abyss and made the abyss blink first. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to send them a message. We're going to show them exactly what humans are capable of when they're pushed into a corner. Hyjin stepped forward. What are your orders, sir? Activate all defensive systems. Recall every ship on patrol. Contact the colonies and tell them to begin evacuation protocols for non-combatants. But anyone who wants to stay and fight gets a weapon. And send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we have reviewed their demands. Doyen's smile returned, cold and sharp as a knife. Tell them our answer is no. The command center erupted into activity. Officers ran to their stations. Screens filled with data as ships received new orders and defense systems came online. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail as the colony shifted to wartime status. Hyjin remained beside Doyan. They'll come with everything they have. Counting on it, Doyan replied. Let them come. Let them bring their fleets and their superior technology and their thousands of years of history. We'll teach them something they've forgotten in all those peaceful centuries. He looked out the window at the stars, where somewhere in the darkness, 10,000 enemy warships were coming to destroy everything humanity had built. We'll teach them why you should be afraid of humans. The 72 hours passed in tense silence. The Galactic Council waited for humanity's surrender. Their massive fleet positioned at the edge of human territory like a sword hanging over a neck. Their communications officers monitored all frequencies, expecting desperate pleas for negotiation, offers of compromise, or, at the very least, requests for more time. Instead, they received nothing. 60 hours passed with no word from humanity. Then 65. 70. Supreme Chancellor Victor grew impatient. Why do they not respond? Do they not understand the magnitude of force arrayed against them? Fleet Marshal Corvex, commander of the Council's military, studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Perhaps they are preparing their evacuation, moving civilians away from the outer colonies, or perhaps they are simply paralyzed with fear, suggested Ambassador Thelk. Oh, at exactly 72 hours. A transmission arrived from Earth. It was brief, containing only a single word in clear text across all channels. No. The council chamber fell silent. Then Victor's crystalline body flared bright with anger. Then they have chosen extinction. Give the order. Begin the assault. The council fleet surged forward, 10,000 warships moving in perfect formation toward the first human colonies. Their strategy was simple and overwhelming. Hit the outer settlements fast and hard. Destroy military installations. Force the colonists to surrender or flee. Show humanity that resistance was futile. Within a week, they expected to control 20 human worlds. Within a month, the war would be over. Admiral Doyon watched the enemy fleet approach from his command ship, the Indomitable, positioned near Haven's Edge colony. Beside him, Captain Juan studied the sensor readings. With clinical precision, she was younger than Doyon, barely 40, but she had earned her position through brilliant tactical thinking during the colony disputes with the Rigel cartels. They're coming in exactly as we predicted, Juan said. Standard council doctrine. Overwhelming force, in tight formation. They're not even trying to be creative. Why would they? Doyon replied. This strategy has worked for them for 3,000 years. Every species they fought has surrendered once they saw the size of the fleet. He smiled grimly. They're about to learn that humans are different. The council fleet reached Kepler Station first, a small mining outpost that housed 5,000 colonists. The council's lead admiral sent the standard surrender demand. When no response came, he ordered the bombardment to begin. His ships moved into position, weapons charging. Then the asteroids started shooting back. The colonists had spent the last 3 days turning every piece of mining equipment into a weapon. Drilling lasers became anti-ship cannons, or haulers became missile platforms. The asteroids themselves had been rigged with hidden railguns, salvaged from destroyed freighters. When the council ships came into range, a supposedly defenseless mining station opened fire from 30 different positions. The council's shields held, but the surprise was total. 3 ships took heavy damage before they could adjust. The admiral, shocked that civilians were fighting back, called for reinforcements. The battle that should have lasted 10 minutes stretched into 3 hours. When Kepler Station finally fell, over 400 council soldiers were dead, and 5 ships were crippled. The colonists fought until the last defensive position was overrun. And even then, some chose to detonate their own stations rather than surrender. The news spread through the council fleet like ice water. These humans were insane. They fought like cornered animals, with no regard for their own survival. Worse, they seemed to take pride in making the council pay for every meter of ground. On Haven's Edge, General Minho prepared his ground forces for the inevitable invasion. He was a career soldier who had cut his teeth in the brutal colony wars on Titan, where humans had fought each other over water rights in frozen tunnels. He knew urban warfare, knew how to turn every building into a fortress and every street into a killing zone. They'll send dropships, he told his officers. Standard planetary assault doctrine. They'll try to take the capital and the spaceport, force us to surrender to save civilian lives. Will we surrender? Asked Lieutenant Taeyong, a young but fierce Marine who had volunteered to stay behind when the civilian evacuation began. Minho said flatly, "We'll make them wish they'd never heard of Haven's Edge." The council dropships came exactly as predicted, descending through the atmosphere in perfect formation. They expected scattered resistance from a demoralized military. Instead, they flew into a hellstorm. Human fighters, small and fast, attacked from every angle using tactics that no council pilot had seen before. They ignored their own safety, ramming damaged ships into enemy formations. They used the planet's atmosphere itself as a weapon, luring council ships into turbulent zones where their larger vessels couldn't maneuver. When the dropships finally reached the ground, Minho's forces were waiting. The council soldiers were better equipped, better trained, and more numerous. But they had never fought an enemy that used schools as ambush points, that hid weapons in children's playgrounds, that turned hospitals into fortified bunkers. The humans fought with a savagery that terrified the council troops, who had been raised in peaceful societies and trained for honorable warfare. While the battles raged, Commander Hygiene led a strike force on a mission that military analysts had called suicidal. She commanded a small fleet of civilian freighters that had been hastily armed with whatever weapons could be bolted to their hulls. Her target was a council supply depot in the Barnard system, a lightly defended station that kept the fleet's forward elements supplied with fuel and ammunition. "They'll have destroyers guarding it," warned her second officer as they approached. "We're flying cargo ships against military warships." "Then we'll have to be creative," Hyjin replied calmly. Her plan was simple and insane. The freighters came in broadcasting distress signals, pretending to be civilian vessels fleeing the war zones. When the council destroyers moved to intercept, Jin's ships scattered into a nearby asteroid field that the aliens considered too dangerous to navigate. The council captains, confident in their superior ships, followed. What they didn't know was that human miners had spent weeks mapping every rock in that field. Hyjin's pilots knew exactly where to fly, threading through gaps that seemed impossible. The council ships, larger and less maneuverable, struggled to follow. Two collided with asteroids and were crippled. A third took damage to its engines and was forced to withdraw. When Hyjin's ships emerged on the other side of the field, the supply depot lay ahead, its defenses designed to stop a frontal assault, not an attack from an unexpected angle. Her freighters opened fire with every weapon they had. The depot's shields failed within minutes, and Hyjin's boarding team stormed inside, fighting hand-to-hand through the corridors. By the time council reinforcements arrived, the depot was a burning wreck, and Hyjin's ships were already jumping back into hyperspace. The victories were small, scattered, and bought with terrible cost. But they were victories. More importantly, they sent a message that spread through both fleets. The humans were not surrendering. They were not running. They were fighting with everything they had, and they were making the council bleed for every inch of territory. In the council war room, Fleet Marshal Korvax stared at the casualty reports with growing horror. In just 1 week of fighting, the council had lost more soldiers than in the previous 50 years combined. The humans were using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They booby-trapped their own buildings. They used false surrender signals to lure in rescue ships. They strapped nuclear weapons to asteroids and threw them at relativistic speeds, creating weapons that were impossible to stop. "These are not soldiers," Korvax said to his staff. "These are demons. They fight without honor, without rules, without any regard for the conventions of war." His intelligence officer, a young Plixian named Torvas, had been studying human history. "Marshal, I've reviewed their records. Humans have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. They've developed thousands of different ways to kill. They've practiced warfare on each other for 10,000 years. We're not fighting a species that learned war from us. We're fighting a species that was born into war and has never stopped perfecting it." Korvax turned to the tactical display. Watching his ships advance slowly through human space, paying in blood for every light year gained. "How do we fight an enemy that refuses to follow any rules?" "I don't know, Marshal," Torvas replied quietly. "I don't think anyone does." Back on the Indomitable, Admiral Doyon reviewed the battle reports with Captain Juan. They had held the line for a week, longer than anyone expected. But the Council fleet was still advancing, still overwhelming human defenses through sheer numbers. More colonies would fall. More soldiers would die. Can we win? Guan asked. Doyen considered the question carefully. Win? Maybe not, but we can make sure they lose too. We can make this war so expensive, so bloody, so traumatic, that the Council will regret ever threatening us. And that might be enough. He opened a channel to all human forces, broadcasting his message to every ship, every colony, every soldier who still fought. "This is Admiral Doyon. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. I know the odds are against us. But look at what we've accomplished. We've stood against the entire Galactic Council for a week, and we're still standing. We've made them bleed. We've made them afraid. Keep fighting. Keep making them pay. Show them that humans do not surrender. Show them that humans do not break. And if we die standing up, with weapons in our hands and defiance in our hearts." The message ended. Across human space, soldiers returned to their posts, Pilots climbed back into their cockpits. Marines checked their weapons one more time. The war was far from over. But humanity had proven something important. They could fight. And they would not stop fighting until the last human was dead, or the Council sued for peace. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Never corner a human. Because humans, when faced with extinction, do not despair. They fight back. 3 weeks into the war, the Galactic Council's advance had slowed to a crawl. They had captured 17 human colonies, but each one had cost them dearly. The casualty reports climbing across Fleet Marshal Korvek's desk told a story that no council leader wanted to acknowledge. This was becoming the bloodiest war in galactic history, and they were fighting an enemy that seemed to grow more dangerous the more desperate they became. The problem, as council military analysts were beginning to understand, was that humanity had learned warfare in the cruelest school imaginable. For thousands of years, humans had fought each other using every tactic, every strategy, every dirty trick that intelligent beings could conceive. They had practiced total war. They understood concepts like acceptable losses and strategic sacrifice. They knew how to fight when outnumbered, outgunned, and facing certain defeat. Because they had done it to each other thousands of times before. Lieutenant Siagen demonstrated this perfectly during the Battle of Procyon. He commanded a small frigate called the Dancing Blade, a ship that was officially listed as a patrol vessel, but had been heavily modified over years of smuggling runs before the war. Siagen himself was a former criminal who had taken a commission when the war started, bringing with him a complete disregard for proper military procedure and a talent for thinking in ways that no military academy would teach. His mission was simple and suicidal. A council carrier group was moving through the Procyon system, carrying supplies and reinforcements to the front lines. Command needed that carrier destroyed. It was protected by 6 destroyers and had point defense systems that could shoot down any missile or torpedo. From 100,000 kilometers away, a conventional attack would fail. The carrier was too well defended. Siogen's solution was unconventional. He loaded his ship with every explosive he could find, set the reactor to overload, aimed the Dancing Blade directly at the carrier, and then evacuated his crew in escape pods hidden inside fake debris. The Council forces detected the incoming ship and destroyed it with contemptuous ease. The explosion was large, but harmless at that range. The debris field expanded slowly, exactly as expected. What the Council didn't expect was that the debris wasn't debris. Hidden among the wreckage were dozens of small missiles with minimal power signatures, coasting silently through space on ballistic trajectories. By the time Council sensors detected them, it was too late. The missiles activated simultaneously, and the carrier's point defenses couldn't track them all. 17 missiles struck home. The massive carrier broke apart in a chain of explosions that lit up the Procyon system. Siagen and his crew, safely floating in their escape pods, watched the fireball expand and then activated their distress beacons. A human rescue ship picked them up 8 hours later. When Siagen reported back to command, he was immediately promoted and asked to train other captains in his methods. The Council called it dishonorable warfare. Humanity called it creative problem-solving. On the technology front, humanity's engineers were performing what the Council considered impossible. Engineer Yuna worked from a hidden facility on Luna, Earth's moon, with a team of programmers and systems analysts. Her target was the Council's fleet communication network, sophisticated quantum encrypted, system that had been considered unbreakable for over 1,000 years. Yuna didn't try to break the encryption. Instead, she found something the Council's ancient system had never been designed to handle: malicious code that exploited the very sophistication of their network. The Council ships communicated with each other constantly, sharing tactical data, coordinating movements, updating threat assessments. Their system was so advanced that it could process millions of decisions per second. Yuna's virus didn't try to shut the system down. It just made tiny changes to the data, subtle alterations that accumulated over time. The virus was deployed during the Battle of Arcturus, hidden inside a fake distress signal from a damaged human freighter. When Council ships scanned the signal, their systems automatically processed it. The virus spread through their network like wildfire. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Ships continued to communicate normally, but small errors began to accumulate. Navigation data was off by fractions of a degree. Threat assessments were slightly incorrect. Timing synchronization drifted by milliseconds. In normal combat, these tiny errors would be meaningless. But the Battle of Arcturus involved 3 separate Council fleets converging on a human stronghold. The fleets were supposed to arrive simultaneously from 3 directions, overwhelming the defenders with coordinated fire. Instead, the virus made each fleet think the others were in slightly different positions than they actually were. When the order came to open fire, the fleets shot at where thought the enemy was, which meant they shot at each other. The resulting chaos was catastrophic. Council ships fired on their own allies. Point defense systems targeted friendly missiles. Navigation computers steered ships into collision courses with their own fleetmates. By the time the commanders realized what was happening and shut down their communication systems, over 40 Council ships were destroyed or crippled. The human defenders outnumbered 5-1. Counterattacked into the confusion and drove the surviving Council ships from the system. Council technicians spent weeks trying to purge the virus from their systems. Every time they thought they had it contained, it would reappear somewhere else, mutating, adapting. Eventually, they were forced to completely shut down their fleet-wide network and revert to simpler, less efficient communication systems. The Council's greatest technological advantage had been turned into a liability by one human engineer and her team. On the ground, General Minho's forces were teaching the Council a brutal lesson in urban warfare. The Council had captured New Beijing Colony, a major human settlement with over 2 million inhabitants. Most civilians had evacuated, but thousands of soldiers remained behind, turning the entire city into a fortress. Council ground forces expected a conventional defense, fortified positions, clear front lines, defensive strong points. Instead, they got a nightmare. Human soldiers didn't hold positions. They attacked and retreated. They used tunnels and sewers to move unseen beneath the streets. They dressed as civilians and ambushed Council patrols. They booby-trapped buildings, rigged entire blocks to explode, and used the city itself as a weapon. Council soldiers advanced through empty streets, never knowing if the next building would erupt in gunfire or if the ground beneath their feet was mined marine. Tae-young led a squad that specialized in hit-and-run attacks. His team would strike a Council position, kill as many soldiers as possible in 30 seconds, and then vanish before reinforcements arrived. They moved through the city using routes that only locals knew, emerging from unexpected angles to attack supply convoys and command posts. Council commanders tried to adapt, but every time they thought they understood human tactics, those tactics changed. They don't fight like soldiers, complained a Council ground commander to his superior. They fight like criminals and terrorists. They have no honor. They fight to win. General Minho replied when he heard the complaint repeated through intelligence channels. Honor is something you can afford when you're not facing extinction. While the battles raged, Dr. Junho was making a breakthrough that would change the strategic balance of the war. He worked in a secret research facility buried deep beneath the lunar surface, part of a team exploring exotic applications of physics. The Council's technology was sophisticated, refined by millennia of development. But it was also conservative, built on principles that had been proven safe and reliable over thousands of years. Humanity, desperate and reckless, was willing to try things the Council had never considered. Junho's team had been studying quantum mechanics in ways that made Council scientists uncomfortable. They were exploring the boundaries where matter and energy behaved in strange, unpredictable ways. Most of their experiments failed. Some failed catastrophically. But a few succeeded in ways that opened entirely new possibilities. The weapon Junho developed was based on quantum entanglement, using principles that the Council knew about, but had never weaponized because they were considered too unstable. When activated, it created a cascade effect in local spacetime that made jump drives fail catastrophically. A ship trying to enter hyperspace while affected by the weapon would simply tear itself apart, scattered across dozens of dimensions simultaneously. The first test was conducted against a Council patrol that had been harassing human supply lines. 3 Council ships detected the strange energy signature and tried to retreat into hyperspace. All three ships vanished in flashes of light that could be seen for millions of kilometers. No wreckage was ever found. Council scientists analyzed the data and immediately classified the weapon as a violation of every convention of civilized warfare. Humanity didn't care. They built more of the weapons and deployed them across strategic systems. Suddenly, Council ships couldn't safely retreat. They couldn't rely on their mobility advantage. They had to fight or surrender. And fighting humans had proven to be a bloody business. Admiral Doyon watched the war reports from the Indomitable and allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The Council's advance had not just slowed, it had stopped. For the first time since the war began, human forces were gaining ground, recapturing lost colonies, pushing back against the invaders. The casualties were still terrible, and humanity was still outnumbered. But the balance was shifting. Captain Jiwan joined him in the command center, carrying her own reports. The Council is requesting a temporary ceasefire to recover their wounded. Doyon said immediately, if they want their wounded back, they can surrender. Some of our officers are arguing we should accept. They say it's the humanitarian thing to do. Humanity is a luxury we can't afford right now, Doyon replied harshly. The Council wanted war. We're giving them war. The real kind, the ugly kind, the kind humanity has practiced on itself for 10,000 years. If they don't like it, they can leave our space and never come back. Qiwan nodded slowly. She didn't necessarily agree, but she understood the logic. Every moment of mercy, every gesture of civilization, gave the Council time to recover and adapt. The only way humanity could win was to press every advantage, exploit every weakness, and never ever let up the pressure. We're changing, she said quietly. This war is changing us, making us harder, meaner. Yes, Doyon agreed. But that's what survival looks like. The Council thought we were barbarians playing at civilization. Maybe they were right. Maybe we are barbarians. But we're barbarians who will not be conquered. Across human space, the war continued. Soldiers fought and died. Cities burned. Ships exploded in the cold darkness between stars. But humanity was no longer losing. They were holding. And more than that, they were teaching the Galactic Council something it had forgotten over 3,000 years of easy dominance. They were teaching the galaxy to fear humans. Supreme Chancellor Victor called the emergency session 6 weeks into what was supposed to have been a brief military action. The council chamber, usually a place of calm deliberation and measured debate, was filled with tension that made the air itself feel heavy. Representatives from all 12 member species had gathered, and for the first time in living memory, they were afraid. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the current state of the war in brutal detail. Red markers indicated council losses. There were far too many red markers. Over 3,000 ships destroyed or disabled. Almost 500,000 soldiers dead. Dozens of supply bases captured or destroyed. Entire fleets unable to advance because human weapons made hyperspace travel too dangerous. And the humans, those primitive newcomers who were supposed to surrender within a week, still fought with undiminished fury. This is unacceptable, declared Ambassador Thelcor, his scales flashing angry crimson. We are the Galactic Council. We have maintained peace for 3 millennia. We have never lost a war. Yet these humans, these children barely out of their own star system, are defeating us. They are not defeating us, Victor corrected sharply. They are merely resisting more effectively than anticipated. Call it what you wish, interjected Representative Plix, their tank bubbling with agitation. The facts remain. We are losing ships faster than we can replace them. Our soldiers refuse to fight because they fear human tactics. 3 of our member species are threatening to withdraw their forces from the conflict. This war is destroying the Council. Fleet Marshal Korvek stood to present his military assessment, and even his movements seemed heavy with exhaustion. He had not slept properly in weeks. The reports that crossed his desk grew worse every day. Filled with accounts of atrocities, surprise attacks, and tactical innovations that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The humans fight without honor, Corvex began. They use tactics that we abandoned thousands of years ago as too brutal, too uncivilized. They disguise military ships as civilian vessels. They fake surrender signals to lure our rescue teams into ambushes. They strap nuclear weapons to asteroids and accelerate them to relativistic speeds, creating projectiles that cannot be stopped or intercepted. They use their own cities as traps, filling them with explosives and waiting for our forces to enter. They even weaponized our own communication systems against us. He paused, and the assembled representatives could see the strain in his posture. They fight like demons, like creatures from our ancient nightmares. And they are very, very good at it, because they practiced on each other, said Counselor Ducanar, a wise old being whose species had been among the founding members of the Council. I have reviewed human history. They have been at war continuously for their entire recorded civilization. They have developed and refined warfare to a degree we cannot match, because we have lived in peace for so long that we have forgotten how to truly fight. Then what do you suggest? Victor demanded. That we surrender to them? I suggest we admit this war was a mistake, Decanar replied calmly. These humans are not a threat that can be eliminated through force. They are a threat that must be accommodated, negotiated with, made into partners rather than enemies. The chamber erupted into argument. Some representatives agreed that the war had become too costly. Others insisted that stopping now would make the council look weak. Still others argued that humanity needed to be taught a lesson. Even if that lesson required committing the council's full military might, consequences be damned. While the council argued with itself, Admiral Doyon was planning something audacious. He sat in a secure conference room aboard the Indomitable with his most trusted officers, studying intelligence reports compiled by their spy network. Commander Haijin had the floor, presenting information that had cost dozens of agents their lives to acquire. We have confirmation, Haijin said, for Council species are on the verge of withdrawing from the war. The D-Canary are pacifists by nature and are horrified by the casualties. The Plix are primarily traders and are losing enormous amounts of money. The Siltar are philosophically opposed to wars of aggression. And the Venthri have always been isolationists and only join the Council for mutual defense purposes. If even one species withdraws, the Council's united front collapses, Captain Juan added. But they can't withdraw while actively at war. It would be political suicide. They need a way to exit that looks honorable. Gun leaned back in his chair, thinking, what if we gave them that exit? What if we offered them something they want more than victory? Such as, asked Haijin, peace, on our terms. Doyon stood and began pacing. The Council declared war to make us submit, to show the galaxy that no one defies their authority. But we've proven we won't submit. We've made this war so costly that continuing it threatens the Council itself. What if we offered them a way to end the war and save face at the same time? They'll never agree to negotiate, Guan protested. Victor would see it as weakness, and we don't negotiate with Victor. Doyen turned to face his officers, and there was a dangerous gleam in his eyes. We go around him. We talk directly to the species that want out. We tell them that humanity is willing to discuss peace, but only as equals, not as conquered subjects. We force the Council to fracture from within. The plan was insane and brilliant and incredibly dangerous. It required infiltrating the Council's home space, bypassing their security, and making contact with representatives from neutral or dissenting species. If it failed, Doyin and everyone with him would be captured or killed. If it succeeded, it might end the war. I'm going, Doyon announced. Gyewan, you're with me? Haijin, you have command of the fleet while I'm gone? If we're not back in 2 weeks, assume we failed and continue the war. Pilot Yunji volunteered to fly the mission. She was one of humanity's best pilots, with an almost supernatural ability to navigate through dangerous space. Her ship, a modified stealth corvette called the Silent Wind, could slip past most sensor systems when properly configured. The team assembled quickly. Doyon, Gunji, and a small squad of elite Marines led by Taeyang, who had earned a field promotion after his actions in New Beijing. They departed from a hidden base in the outer colonies, traveling through unmapped hyperspace routes that only human explorers knew existed. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of tense silence as they slipped between council patrols and sensor networks. Yonji flew like she was dancing with death, her hands steady on the controls as she threaded the silent wind through detection grids that should have been impossible to bypass. Their destination was Velthair, the ancient world where the Galactic Council met. Security around the planet was intense. But Yunji had studied the patrol patterns and found a gap. A brief window when 2 sensor fields overlapped in a way that created a blind spot. She dove through that gap with seconds to spare, bringing the silent wind down on the dark side of one of Velthair's moons. From there, Doyen's team used a shuttle disguised as a council diplomatic transport. The disguise was good enough to get them past the first 2 security checkpoints. The 3rd checkpoint would have caught them, but Taeyong's Marines created a distraction. A small explosion in a nearby hangar that drew security forces away for crucial minutes. Soyang, a human intelligence agent who had been embedded in council space for years, met them inside the diplomatic district. She had arranged secret meetings with representatives from 3 different species, all of whom were looking for a way out of the war, but couldn't approach humanity openly. The first meeting was with Counselor Dukanar. The old being studied Doyen with ancient eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "You are either very brave or very foolish to come here, Admiral." "Both probably," Doyen admitted. "But we need to talk. This war is destroying both our peoples." "My people never wanted this war," Dekanar said. But Victor convinced the majority that humanity was a threat that needed to be contained. "We are a threat," Doyen agreed, "but not to species that treat us with respect. We're only a threat to those who try to conquer us." "Tell me, Counselor, what would it take for the Dekanari to support peace?" "Recognition," Dukanar said immediately. "Humanity must be recognized as a sovereign species with the same rights as any council member. No restrictions on your expansion. No reparations for the D. Or," Doyen continued, "we can choose peace. Not the peace of conqueror and conquered. Not the peace of master and servant, but the peace of equals. You recognize humanity as a sovereign species with full rights to our territories. We agree to follow galactic law and respect your borders. We become partners in the galactic community rather than enemies." "Impossible," Victor said flatly. "The Council does not negotiate with criminals. You have violated every standard of civilized warfare. You have committed atrocities. You must be punished." "Then punish us," Doyen replied, and his voice went hard as steel. "Come at us with everything you have. Throw another 10,000 ships into our space? We'll destroy them too. Send 1,000,000 soldiers. We'll bury them. We will fight you until stars burn out and galaxies die. Because we are humans, and we do not submit." He turned slowly, making eye contact with every representative in the chamber. "But if you're willing to accept peace, we're ready to talk. Right now. Today. End this war before more blood is spilled. Recognize our sovereignty, and we'll recognize yours. Give us a place at this table as equals, and we'll prove we can be civilized. Or refuse, and watch your council tear itself apart as species after species abandons a war they never wanted in the first place." Counselor Dukanar stood from his seat. "The Dekanari support immediate peace negotiations. This war has gone on long enough." The Plix representative floated forward. "The Plix Commercial Consortium also supports negotiations. This war is destroying our economy and our people's spirit." One by one, other species began to speak. Not all of them supported peace. Some still called for humanity's destruction. But enough voices joined the call for negotiations that Victor could no longer ignore them. The Chancellor's crystalline body dimmed, and everyone who knew him could see the moment when he realized he had lost control of the council. "Very well," Victor said, and his voice sounded like breaking glass. "We will discuss terms. But know this, human. If these negotiations fail, the council will not show mercy again." "We don't want mercy," Doyen replied. "We want respect. Give us that, and we'll give you peace." The negotiations took 3 weeks. They were held in a neutral location, an ancient space station that had been built by a species long extinct. Commander Haijin, represented humanity's military interests. Ambassador Hanyol, a skilled diplomat who had studied alien cultures for decades, handled the political aspects. General Minho sent detailed reports from the front lines, reminding everyone that human forces were still fighting, still holding their ground, still making the Council pay for every system they tried to take. The Council wanted reparations for their losses. Humanity refused absolutely. They had not started this war. The Council wanted restrictions on human expansion. Humanity refused that too. They would not accept limits on their growth or their territory. The Council wanted guarantees that humanity would follow galactic law. Humanity agreed, but only if they had a voice in writing those laws. Back and forth the negotiations went. Some days it seemed like peace was impossible. Tempers flared. Delegations walked out. But always they came back to the table. Because the alternative was continued war. And neither side could afford that anymore. Engineer Yuna made the breakthrough that finally convinced the Council to accept human terms. She offered to share the quantum weapon technology with all Council species, making it available for mutual defense rather than keeping it as a human monopoly. Dr. Junho provided detailed specifications for other human innovations in physics and engineering. The message was clear. Humanity could be a source of advancement for the entire galaxy, or they could be an enemy that destroyed everything. The choice was the Council's. The final treaty was signed on neutral ground, witnessed by representatives from dozens of species. Humanity received full sovereignty over all their colonies. A demilitarized zone was established between human space and Council space. Humanity was granted membership in the Galactic Council with full voting rights. In exchange, humanity agreed to stop aggressive expansion for 50 years and to contribute to galactic defense efforts. It was not a complete victory for either side. The Council had to accept that they could not control humanity. Humanity had to accept that they could not simply take whatever they wanted. But it was peace. And after 8 weeks of brutal warfare, peace was enough. Admiral Doyen stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital station, watching the last Council warships leave human space. The war was over. Humanity had survived. More than that, they had earned their place in the galaxy through strength and sacrifice. The cost had been terrible. Over 2 million humans had died, soldiers and civilians both. Entire colonies had been damaged or destroyed. Ships and resources had been consumed in quantities that would take decades to replace. But they had won something precious. They had won respect. The galaxy would never again see humans as weak or easily controlled. They had proven that humanity was dangerous, resilient, and absolutely unwilling to accept subjugation. Species across the galaxy watched the treaty signing and understood that a new power had emerged. One that fought with a ferocity born from 10,000 years of practicing warfare on themselves. Captain, Goon joined Doyon on the observation deck. Do you think it will last? The peace. Doyon considered the question carefully. For a while, maybe the full 50 years. The Council needs time to recover and rebuild, and they're afraid of us now. That fear will keep them honest. And after 50 years, we'll be stronger, bigger, more advanced. If they try this again, it won't be a war. It will be a slaughter. Doyon turned to look at Juwan. But I don't think they will. I think we taught them something important. We taught them that humans are not a problem to be solved through force. We're a species that must be dealt with as equals. Across human space, life slowly returned to normal. Soldiers came home. Colonies began to rebuild. The dead were mourned and remembered. But something had changed in humanity's collective consciousness. They had faced the entire galaxy and survived. They had been told to surrender and had said no. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction and had pushed back hard enough to make their enemies beg for peace. Pilot Yunji, now promoted to squadron commander, prepared her ships for patrol duty along the new border. The war might be over, but vigilance was still necessary. She briefed her pilots with words that would become famous throughout human space. We fought for our right to exist. We earned our place among the stars. Now we defend it. And if anyone ever threatens humanity again, we make sure they regret it. On Haven's Edge, General Minho oversaw the reconstruction of the cities his forces had defended so desperately. The scars of war would take years to heal, but the colony was alive, functioning, growing. Children played in streets where soldiers had fought and died. Buildings rose from ruins. Life continued in the council chambers. Now, including a human representative for the first time, the galaxy's leaders met to discuss the future. Supreme Chancellor Vikthar had resigned, replaced by a more moderate leader who understood that the galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer an upstart species to be controlled. They were a major power that could not be ignored. Ambassador Hanyul took her seat at the council table and looked around at the alien faces surrounding her. Some showed respect. Others showed lingering hostility. All showed wariness. She smiled and began her first speech as humanity's voice in galactic affairs. We come in peace, but we will never again accept anything less than equality and respect. That is humanity's promise to you all. The Galactic Council had declared war on humanity, expecting easy victory. They had learned instead that humans were not afraid. Humans were fierce, creative, stubborn, and absolutely unwilling to surrender. The galaxy would remember that lesson for generations to come, and humanity would make sure they never forgot. The age of human expansion had only just begun. The war had been a test, and humanity had passed. Now the galaxy would learn what humans could accomplish when they were building instead of fighting. And the stars themselves would not be enough to contain humanity's ambition. The story of the war would be told for centuries. Children would learn about Admiral Doyen's defiance. Students would study Commander Hygen's tactics. Engineers would build on Yuna's innovations. Soldiers would remember General Minho's courage. And all of humanity would carry forward the lesson that had been written in blood and fire across dozens of star systems. Never threaten humanity. Never corner them. Never underestimate them. Because humans, when pushed to the edge, do not break. They push back, and they make their enemies regret ever picking the fight. The Galactic Council had declared war on humanity. Humanity had declared they would survive. And in the end, survival was the greatest victory of all.